Good morning once again. This is the Castle Think Tank webinar, and today we are blessed indeed to be discussing faith institutions. And the discussion is something that I will encourage you to be part of. And as well, we do run this video on this broadcast on Facebook. So kindly share or start a watch party that we may have other friends and interested people join in and be part of the discussion and conversation. The same thing with Twitter today. We will have this webinar being monitored and being shared out on Twitter, and the hashtags are #CastleWebinar and #ThriveFaith. Thrive Faith. So those are the two Twitter hashtags. But once again, you are very much welcome to this webinar on faith institutions. But before we proceed into anything further, I would like to welcome Mr. Daudi Nkugwa to open up with a word of prayer. Do we have Mr. Nkugwa available? If it's not, then let's have Dr. Magara open up this session with a word of prayer.
Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to discuss matters to do with faith in our country. And we ask that as we deliberate and hear history, but also look at possibilities that are being opened up, we pray, Lord, that you will guide us, guide this conversation. We ask, oh God, that we'll get insights, and Lord, that your name will be glorified. We ask this in our Lord's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Magara. Today, we will get into this webinar. But before that, a couple of reminders. Every about 30 minutes during the webinar, we put up a poll question. And the intention of the poll question is to have the webinar attendees join in and participate in the polling. So we will be requesting you every about 30 minutes when that question comes up on your screen. Please select the option that makes the best sense for you concerning the relevant question. So you will see that pop up every once in a while when I call for that poll question, and we have 4 questions in the poll today. Secondly, I mentioned earlier about the hashtags for this webinar today, but I will repeat that. The hashtags on Twitter are #CastleWebinar and #ThriveFaith. So you could retweet, you could do your own tweets, you could have others who follow you, follow the discussion that is happening at hand today. And we also do have a section. If you look at your Twitter, at your screen, right at the bottom, there is the menus option, or wherever the menu options are on your screen, there is a section for Q&A, a section for Q&A. We encourage you to utilize that section to make your comments, to react to discussions, to ask questions. The panelists that we have today will be ready at hand to respond to those questions, to comment against your comments, and to as well be able to respond to them. We will be able to pick up a couple of those questions during the public discussion section, which is the last section that we have towards the tail end of this webinar, about an hour to the end of the webinar. So we encourage you to participate in the discussion today using the Q&A section by tweeting and retweeting what is going on in this webinar, and by sharing a watch party on Facebook with the video that is running live on our Facebook page. Welcome once again. Now, religion is the opium of the people, which is a statement that was made by Karl Marx in his celebrated dictum of 1843. And throughout the ages, men and women have given their lives for it. They have abandoned comfort to protect it, and have given their all to ensure its perpetration. Faith institutions have outlived even the most powerful governments and empires, and their tenets have been passed on from generation to generation. Uganda is no exception to the above. In the 1800s, the Uganda martyrs gave their lives for their faiths. They came from Anglican, Catholic, and Muslim. The Muslim martyrs were killed on orders of Sekabaka Mutesa I in 1877, and more than 70 were burned to death on that day. The Christian martyrs consisted of 23 Anglican, 22 Catholic converts to Christianity, and these were executed between 31st January of 1885 and 27 January of 1887 by Sekabaka Mwanga of Buganda then. Faith institutions have a great impact on society as portrayed by Max Weber in his treatise, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. He argues in that book that capitalism in Northern Europe evolved when the Protestant, specifically the Calvinist ethic, influenced large numbers of people to engage in work in the secular world, developing their own enterprises and engaging in trade and accumulation of wealth and investment. He argues that Puritan ethics and ideas influenced the development of capitalism through their values, spirit of hard work, healthy pursuit of wealth and progress, and it was built by religious devotion and rejection of worldliness. The Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran led the revolution. He was a cleric and founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran and led the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which saw the end of the 2,500-year-old Persian monarchy. And Khomeini became the country's supreme leader, a position created in the constitution of the Islamic Republic as the highest ranking political and religious office. Corrie ten Boom, in her true life story, The Hiding Place, published in 1971, narrates how her faith caused her to hide away hunted Jews from their Nazi tormentors. In the book Gideon's Spies, Thomas Gordon, in 1999, an investigative journalist, he touches on the role played by the Catholic Church in bringing down the famous Iron Curtain. According to the fourth Global Trends Report 2025 done by the US National Intelligence Council, faith will play an increasingly major role by 2025 as religion-based networks may be quintessential and may also overall play a more powerful role on many transnational issues of various kinds. So faith institutions have played and will always play an influential role in their nations and people, a role that should not by any means be ignored, nor taken lightly, hence our discussion today. In no order of preference or importance on this webinar this morning, we are privileged to host as panelists the following people: Mr. Pade Mosana, Imam Iban Idi Kasozi, Reverend Daniel Wejuli, and Bishop Rele. You'll excuse me, Reverend Wejuli sent Mr. Serwanja to represent him. He was on an assignment elsewhere. And we will welcome our panelists in a special way with their full profiles when we are calling up each one to come up and make their contribution to the discussion today. My name is Bukenya Paul Michael, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. But before we get into that discussion, allow me to welcome one of the board members of the Castle Think Tank, Mr. Ernest Katwesije, to give his opening remarks. Ernest.
Thank you, Paul. Our special guests today are panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome you to this webinar on behalf. Thank you for choosing to be part of this webinar, which is part of a series of webinars that we have been holding as Castle for the last few months. We all have to agree that the COVID-19 outbreak and subsequent lockdowns introduced a new normal in our country, in our continent, in the world, that we must find ways of working around. And one of the most affected aspects of society has been the faith institutions. We all remember that the president declared a lockdown in the country in March, and one of the key aspects was suspension of public congregating by faith institutions, and this has remained the case to date. And of course, this ushered in both new opportunities and new challenges for us. We have since seen new and renewed corporate worship endeavors, such as the use of both traditional media and social media to pass on the message. However, an eyesore that remains is that we will agree that the faith leaders have generally had a more sporadic and uncoordinated approach. Nevertheless, there has been a positive effort to respond to the times. Now that COVID has been with us, at least in this country, for about 6 months, and it looks like it's bound to remain around much longer, there is need for us to embrace this new normal more deliberately. We need to be able to have well-articulated thoughts, ideas, and propositions in order to support the faith institutions to be more effective in promoting godliness and the common good. CASO presents this opportunity for us to get together at a round table, deliberate on the most effective way forward for faith institutions, especially post-COVID. CASO, or the Center for Advanced Strategic Leadership, is a non-profit think tank that has been established to provide research and consultancy towards approaches for addressing challenges to Africa's advancement. CASO is a product of the Institute for National Transformation, INT, which is a leadership training institution in Africa that has since 2005 been developing transformational leaders who are serving society in a variety of sectors. INT is headquartered in Nigeria and operates also in Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire. It also has training centers in the United Kingdom and the United States of America for reaching out to Africans in the diaspora. CASO complements INT by providing a practical platform to offer tailored interventions to specific issues that will be identified across the African continent. It exists to promote the application of critical thought leadership to the governance of Africa's key sectors for national transformation. We as CASO believe that the African continent is endowed with a wealth of natural resources, a qualified and experienced workforce, and abundant opportunities. The desirable impact of these combined attributes are, however, often curtailed by challenges of thought leadership, governance, and execution. CASO seeks to help to bridge the gap between knowledge and practice among stakeholders in Africa's transformation, and to do so in a manner that furthers national interests in all respects. Our services as CASO include policy research, sustainable strategies for transformation, leadership and governance development, fostering constructive dialogue, and innovation, among others. We target the central and local government stakeholders of key sectors of the economy and both public and private institutions. We work in a manner that is forthright, non-partisan, respective of diversity, and aligned with national aspiration. The other board members of CASO include Dr. James Magara, who is the chairman, Ms. Christina Lupo, Honorable Benson Obuogwa, Professor Joseph Onyu, Mr. Robert Mutiaba, Mr. Paul Bukenya, and Ms. Catherine Muomuza. Today, we are privileged as CASO to be hosting this very important webinar where we are reflecting on our faith institutions. Special thanks go to our guests and panelists today, Bishop Joseph Luele, Dr. Cecilia Oyet, Dr. Paddy Musana, Imam Iban Kasozi, and Charles Seranja, and also to our moderator, Mr. Paul Michael Bukenya. It is our sincere hope that the deliberations we are going to hold shall birth transformational ideas that shall take us through the post-COVID era. We hope that we shall be able to generate adequate lessons to spur faith institutions so that they can thrive as they play their role in the development of Uganda and Africa in a coordinated and impactful way. I wish all of us blessed deliberations today. Thank you for joining once again. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ernest Katwisi J. And without further ado, to kick us off in the discussion today, we will be having the discussant from CASO Think Tank to present the think piece. Dr. Cecilia Atim Oyet is the founder, Mother and Ministers International, acronym MAMI. Pastor Dr. Cecilia Atim Oyet is the founder of MAMI. She has worked as a banker for 15 years and has held leadership positions in churches, including being a women's leader at Deliverance Church from 1998 to the year 2000, women's leader in Lifeline Ministries from the year 2000 to 2007, and coordinator of churches under Lifeline Ministries 2007 to 2013. Cecilia was ordained as a pastor in 2002, and she has been a member of the board of National Water and Sewerage Corporation from 2013 to 2019. She is married to Apostle Julius Peter Oyet, and together they have 4 children and have fostered many children after the war in northern Uganda. Cecilia is trained in negotiation skills for the world of work from the International Training Center of the International Labour Organization in Italy. She has also attended various pieces of training in corporate governance, including a course on enhancing board composition and effectiveness with board affairs in London. Servant leadership training from Sandlos African Leadership Institute, SALT, in Kampala, and she is an alumnus of the Institute for National Transformation, INT, making her an OXID. She holds a bachelor's degree in veterinary medicine, a master's degree in business administration, and both were obtained from Makerere University, Kampala. Dr. Cecilia, present the think piece for today. Dr. Cecilia, can you hear us? You need to unmute your microphone, please. Let me work on that. Let me see if I can pick it up from here. Go ahead, we can now hear.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you, doctor. Please go ahead.
Okay, a good morning to everyone. And I would like to thank God for this morning and for the opportunity to be on the panel of this webinar. And I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge my fellow panelists, Bishop Luere, Dr. Paddy Musana, and my friend whose name is very difficult, the Imam. Uh, and yeah, I just want to acknowledge my fellow panelists and the moderator, Paul. Thank you for the fire you brought us. And I also would like to appreciate everybody in the audience for taking their time to come and participate in this webinar. On a special note, allow me to appreciate the leadership of Castle for giving me this privilege to be the one to present this thing, this. Today, our webinar is about faith institutions. And I'll just go straight to the presentation. By way of background, I would want to say that Uganda is a very religious country with only 0.2% of the population identifying themselves as not subscribing to any religion as revealed by the 2014 national census. The religious diversity of the nation is affirmed by the Constitution, which states that there is no state religion and prohibits discrimination. It instead provides for freedom of belief and the right to practice any religion of choice. According to the 2014 census, the breakdown of the Ugandan population according to religious affiliation is as follows. We have the people of the Catholic faith, the Roman Catholic Church, forming 39.3%. Then the Church of Uganda, 32%. The Muslims come next with 13.7%. And the born again or evangelicals, 4% of the population.
Dr. Cecilia, we seem to have lost you. Dr. Cecilia, can you hear us? Okay, we seem to have lost Dr. Cecilia for a minute there. Just give us a moment to try and recover her availability. Hello, Dr. Cecilia, are you back? Okay, in the absence of Dr. Cecilia, I would request that you give us a minute to have someone else take up that discussion and present the think piece and complete it.
Paul, I can step in for her.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Magar.
If you just confirm, just give me 1 minute. Okay, so she covered the setup of the different groups, the different religious affiliations in the country, and I'll just continue from there. So the majority of these faith-based groups belong to the Interreligious Council of Uganda, IRCU, which is a non-government organization which was established in 2001, which brings together different religious institutions to address issues of common interest and basically bring harmony between the different groups. The IRCU works with the civil society all over the country, providing faith-based approaches like care and advocacy. And besides the IRCU, there are fraternities among the Christians that bring the different Christian groups together. You have the UJCC, which was established in 1963 with a similar agenda to that of the RICU. Whose membership includes the Roman Catholic Church, the Church. Other fraternities include Fellowship for Born Again Pentecostal Churches and the Born Again Faith Federation, and there are other groups as well, like the UJN. The Muslims similarly have a number of groups that bring their fraternities, different fraternities that bring together. And if you look at some of the other smaller faiths, like the Hindus, they also have groups that bring them together. So there are different bodies that act as umbrella bodies for the different expressions of faith in the country. So there are numerous faith-based organizations formed by different groups, and some are non-denomination as well, that work to support government efforts for the development of the nation, and have aided communities in various ways. We have also other groups that have been very much involved in humanitarian work. I think some of the more well-known ones are groups like the World Vision and Compassion International, but there are several. I'll talk about the role and impact of faith-based organizations in Uganda. They do play the role of providing spiritual nourishment to their followers and grooming them to be God-honoring and better equipped to serve the nation and beyond. So they guide, support, and encourage their members through various circumstances in life. Now, apart from that, the majority of faith-based organizations reach out to provide tangible support to their members and to the community at large. Now, in Uganda, they have done a lot, and in the formation of the nation, going back over 100 years, and they continue to do so. Faith-based organizations laid the foundations for education and health. A lot of the social services they were very key in laying the foundations way back from the 19th century. And in the majority of cases, they do not only stop at building institutions, but they continue to engineer rural development as well through provision of services like water, sanitation, and even sources of power in some places. In many cases, there are training institutions. They have training institutions for workers like nurses, teachers, and also vocational schools for skilling people in different kinds of craftsmanship. As at 2016, there were over 6,490 schools under the Church of Uganda in the category of kindergarten, primary, secondary, and special needs schools. The Roman Catholic Church had up to 6,311 in the same categories, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church had 462. Although there was no amalgamated record, the other Christian denominations, the Pentecostals, Evangelicals, they have numerous other schools as well. And the Muslims founded schools. Muslim founded schools are up to 1,485 in number at that time. And they also have the Islamic University in Uganda, which is located in Mbale. And there are other faith-based tertiary institutions, including Uganda Matters University and two others that were Catholic founded. Then you have 4 universities, including Uganda Christian University and Deji University, founded by Church of Uganda. You have the Bugema University, founded by the Seventh-day Adventist. You have the Africa Bible University and Africa Renewal University, run by evangelical churches. There are also many Bible colleges, including the Baptist Seminary located in Jinja, Glad Tidings in Kampala, the Pentecostal Theological College and University in Bale. So you can see that faith-based in the whole area of education. They also run health facilities, and this keep growing in number. Some of the religious groups, including Catholics, Church of Uganda, the Muslims, the Orthodox, have medical bureaus that do the work located all around the nation. Some of the more well-known hospitals, you have Kibuli Muslim Hospital, you have the Rubaga and Zambia hospitals, Mengo Hospital, and so on, and others around the country. As at 2014, 70% of the medical facilities owned by faith-based organizations were operated by the Roman Catholic Church and Church of Uganda over the last century. Now, pre-COVID, the situation among faith-based organizations pre-COVID, before the pandemic and the lockdown, leaders were carrying out traditional meetings with the members congregating together regularly in person. Most of the faith-based organizations concentrated their activities within the four walls, within the buildings. There was not too much outreach into the community. Those who had projects and activities like training, seminars or conferences continued with these normally. And there's a lot of traveling, both within the country and abroad. The majority of these activities came to a standstill with the onset of the pandemic and the lockdown more specifically. We'll now look at the impact of COVID-19. With the onset of COVID-19 and the lockdown, traveling abroad ceased as soon as the airport was closed. And there was also traveling within the country, which followed suit. Most of the scheduled programs of faith-based organizations could not proceed, and neither could international partners and guests come in, as was normally the case. Regular meetings in places of worship were stopped, as you're aware, and even visitation among the faithful came down because of restrictions on movement. And of course, these interventions impacted incomes of the faith-based organizations. Many of the churches are not set up, or churches or religious organizations are not set up online platforms for financing, so giving was severely affected. And of course, the fact that people are not working, it also curtailed the source of income. And so this, the budgets, the incomes of faith-based, of people who work with faith-based organizations were very heavily affected. In some cases, there have been layoffs, salaries have been cut, apart from a few cases where those who have thrived are those who were quick to move onto the online platforms. Perhaps the most saddening and shocking impact on faith-based organizations was being relegated to the background by the government and considered as non-essential. That has been painful for faith-based organizations. And owing to this, leaders have remained agitated throughout the period. This time when they've been locked down. However, there are some actions that have been taken by the religious groups or faith-based organizations during this pandemic, and we'll just point out some of them. When the president announced the lockdown and suspended the gathering of religious groups in March, all the religious leaders embraced the activity, the directives. They took it upon themselves to spread the messages to their members. There was really very little resistance on that. I think people responded very well. And the president himself hailed the religious leaders in his address of 18th March 2020. The religious leaders have also stood strong among opinion leaders to influence the opinions of the public around the nation during this time, abating fears and dealing with the negative attitudes among the population. And this has been done on the media, TV, radio. The majority of the leaders went ahead and used social media, WhatsApp, Facebook for this purpose. Others used their equipment and trucks to sensitize their communities to observe the SOPs, washing of hands, staying home, social distancing, and also reminded them to remember their creator in these difficult times. Though people couldn't meet physically, there was a very big move to mobilize people through the media. Now, besides passing on messages of hope to their members and the public, the religious leaders also unanimously called for prayer for the nation among their different groups. And prayers have continued with guidance being given over the airwaves and through social media. Also family prayers, small groups. These have been an asset to the country. Counseling services and psychological services have also been offered by faith-based organizations. And they have also been key. I think we've never had a year with more prayer meetings in State House than we've had this year. And the leaders have been there to lead the nation in prayer. And a number of them, as I've mentioned, have moved to broadcast their services on the various TV and radio stations across the country. Others have live streamed their meetings through the internet and meetings like we are holding now, Zoom, digital growth. We don't have the figures, but there's been a massive growth in the use of the media by religious groups. Some religious groups and faith-based organizations had resources and were able to offer tangible support to their members and even contribute to the national drive of fundraising from the public. Others were better placed extended support to the general public and to vulnerable groups. And the IRCU launched a multi-religious humanitarian fund and was able to supplement government efforts to supply foodstuffs. A few were among those that responded to the call, as I mentioned, by the president. Now, the pandemic exposed certain gaps, and I want to focus on this for the faith-based organizations. Although the different fraternities that were mentioned are existent, most of them did not respond as a unit. It took a while to have a more unified response coming up. And a lot of the responses actually happened individually and perhaps exposed a lack of readiness among faith-based organizations for this kind of crisis. So the issue of unity, working together, came to the fore. The majority of the FBOs, faith-based organizations, did not have the resources to support their members who were hard pressed during the pandemic, which also raises another issue about preparedness for times of crisis. Maybe exposing a lack of planning, lack of preparedness to handle eventualities, as was the case during this pandemic. The suffering among the population, the majority of whom are members of faith-based organizations, as you saw in the statistics, has also been a reflection of the fact that people may not have been trained properly by the different organizations to work smart, to plan, to save, to plan for the future. Many religious groups, especially in the rural areas, were not able to sustain communication with their members during this lockdown. And this was partly due to lack of records, lack of technology, and poor connectivity, poor networks, and also lack of technical know-how. So the issue of technology in the world we've entered in, the world has been pushed through a door that has forced a massive jump in the use of technology, and it's something that our faith-based organizations do well to note. So communication was an issue with a number of them. The lockdown provided opportunity for people to spend more time with their families, and unfortunately, one of the downsides that was the increase in domestic violence and child abuse, teenage pregnancy. And this was also another reflection of perhaps the poorness of the message coming from faith-based organizations, so that the faithful have not been groomed to live out their values and principles of their faith. And so when pressure comes like this, we see some dark things showing up. Could it be that members have been very busy on religious programs and they've also had no time to bond with their families? Something we'll discuss today. So as I begin to come to the point of recommendations, it's important that we explore how faith-based organizations can reinvent themselves to become more relevant under the new normal and become indispensable, so that there will be no question of whether they're essential or non-essential. It was as I said earlier, a painful discussion for a number of people in the sector. So though there have been a number of good responses, the challenges brought by the pandemic, there are things that could have been done better. And so this is an opportunity to rethink strategies and make faith-based organizations more relevant and essential to the development of our country. So look at some recommendations that we are presenting to this webinar. One is the need for greater unity and cooperation for the achievement of common goals. We will never, at least we may never agree on everything, even within the same religions. But there are some things that are common goals that we can agree on to work on. And when I say we, I'm putting myself as a member of one faith-based organization. You had the statistics, less than 1%, much less than 1% of Ugandans don't claim not to subscribe to any organization. So they need to work together, emphasize the shared views and values as opposed to divergent ones. Most, if not all faith-based organizations are peace-loving. They believe in the sovereignty of God, working for the good of Ugandan communities and supporting the government in developmental activities. So there are areas that we can come together, or FBOs can come together and work together and cooperate and work synergistically for more impact, and also be examples to the country for unity and patriotism. The second
we
thing
have
is
2 minutes to go.
Okay, I'll just go through the other points quickly. Godly values. The issue of values is critical. The moral decay in the country cannot be put on the doors of the doorfoots of the government, because the faith-based organizations are best placed to affect the morality in the nation. And this is something that has to be addressed. The third thing is grooming of the faithful in a holistic way, not just focusing on spiritual issues, but dealing with things that have to do with skills and training and empowering them to be productive, healthy, and planning for the future. The fourth thing has to do with the acquisition of technology and equipping the youth for employability and innovation. This, with the young population, I think it's an area that faith-based organizations also are very well placed, as we've seen in our history of the last 100 years, to actually lead the way and not wait for government, but lead the way in affecting employability and making sure the youth are employable. The fifth thing has to do with setting up robust communication networks, ensuring that members are registered and they're able to use technology. We really can't run away from this. The world has shifted and we need to shift. And then revisiting social services, as they laid, FBOs laid the foundations for education and healthcare. And it's good to know they're still involved in training for healthcare and for education as well. But it's an area that a lot more can be done, and social services needs to be revisited and as points of delivery. And then the seventh thing, and the last one, has to do with considering the possibility of going into manufacturing and industry, leveraging their diverse followerships for social enterprise. An example is the modern life insurance system, which owes its beginnings to the Presbyterian Church in Scotland. That's a very interesting story to read up. FBOs could enter the field of health insurance, mechanized agriculture, manufacturing, to mention but a few. In conclusion, we're convinced that when faith-based organizations embark seriously on implementation of recommendations that have been mentioned and others that will come today, both as individual organizations and corporately, they will be able to nurture Ugandans and especially the youth and equip them for better service for our nation. And government is not geared to foster morality. Faith-based organizations are, and they should step up to that mandate. I'll end with a quote from the Irish statesman and philosopher Edmund Burke: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Magara, and indeed, thank you for stepping in. Dr. Cecilia Oyet got a power outage, and she's a bit far out of the city. So our sincere apologies for that interruption on that event, but we have been able to walk through the Think Piece paper for today. And just a few notices on Twitter. You can go to #CassoWebinar or #ThriveFaith, and you can retweet the deliberations and the discussions that are going on. We as well are broadcasting live on Facebook, so you can share a watch party and invite friends on. We'll be having a poll question once every 30 minutes, and we will encourage you to participate in the poll question. And the first poll question is coming up just about now. As we wait for the poll question, please put your comments and questions on the Q&A section, and we will be attending to them. The first question is, faith institutions have significantly contributed to the transformation of society. Faith institutions have significantly contributed to the transformation of society. Yes, no, to some extent, I don't know. The answers are yes, no, to some extent, I don't know. So there's 4 options for you. Select one of the 4 options. And the question that we are addressing right now on the poll is, faith institutions have significantly contributed to the transformation of society. Is the answer yes? Is the answer no? Or is the answer I, to some extent, or you are purely saying, I don't know? We have about 30 seconds to go before we pull down this poll. Just to remind you that put your comments, your questions on the Q&A section, and we will have the panelists speak to them and address them during the call. We have a few seconds to go on this poll question. Faith institutions have significantly contributed to this transformation of society, and the poll will be ending just about now. Thank you very much for all that have participated in this. And indeed, most people, 77%, believe faith institutions have significantly contributed to the transformation of society, and the 3% believe they haven't. And to some extent, there is a 23%, and there is no one that has polled, I don't know. Thank you very much for participating into these results. We'll jump straight into the discussion and the reactions to the think piece presented by Casso. And the first discussant is Mr. Pade Musana. Chairperson of the, not chairperson, Pade is a senior lecturer in the Department of Religion and Peace Studies, formerly Department of Religious Studies, at his alma mater, Makerere University, where he taught since 1991 at both undergraduate and graduate levels. He was the head of the same department from 2014 to 2017. His areas of study are the Bible and religion and society, with a special interest in new religious movements. He has authored articles and edited books in this regard. Pade has co-edited the Uganda Churches and Political Center. Pade has co-edited the Ugandan Churches and the Political Center, which is a highly recommended read for anyone who is keen on discerning the role Christianity has played in the historical evolution of Uganda as a nation state. His forthcoming religious movements shaping the Ugandan society, it will be a sequel, and it addresses the Pentecostal movement in Uganda. He is married to Evas, with whom they have a number of children. Pade, you are welcome to speak to the think piece.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. We appreciate the program and the arrangement by Casso. I'm happy for this opportunity. It's an opportunity I must confess I have long longed for, especially in the aspect of the role of religious institutions during this COVID time. What amazed me and what was of great concern most to me was when there was a declaration of the lockdown and different vehicles were given stickers by the Ministry of Transport, and the silence, which was very conspicuous, of the religious leaders. And my question was much more to do with this is a moment of anxiety, it's a moment of fear, it's a moment of great challenge, and it is at such a time as this that we seriously need the intervention of religious leaders who are vanguards in giving psychosocial support. And as you know, and as you very well remember, it was like heaven falling onto us, not in a positive manner, when this lockdown was pronounced. In addition, were the pronouncements like no one is supposed to do anything contrary to or not coming through government arrangement, otherwise that would be considered criminal. Criminalization of most of these engagements also by what we would call direct non-state actors. And I personally felt the need, and I was asking myself, where is the voice of the religious leaders? Katso is using two words here. I do not know whether we are supposed to be using them interchangeably. There is the aspect of faith. In most cases, faith is much more of an intangible, yes, in our common view. And yet religion is much more evident or tangible in a way, because when we are talking about religious institutions, these are visible and clear, whereas faith can be without even religion. It's possible for some people to have faith without belonging to any religious institution. And so faith-based organizations, yes, I would personally desire to use religious organizations or institutions. Now, we obviously know the stress that COVID-19 has come with, and it has been an interesting and learning curve for me, as I have been obviously confined for some good time without congregating in a religious setting. And then my interest was to check out on how the religious leaders, our organizations, were reaching out to their members. And one of the things that I have noted is obviously when you switch on the TV and watch the religious programs, they're in particular languages. Most of them have been specifically in Luganda and English. And the religious institutions themselves, I think, have failed, most of them, and I'm talking about specifically the traditional or mainstream religious institutions like the Roman Catholic Church, which has the highest percentage of Ugandans, and the Anglican Church. They have failed to reach out to speak, so to say, the common person's language. And so, as far as I'm concerned, this appropriation of the media channels like NTV, NBS, and these major channels does not really address the people from northern Uganda or from Karamoja. And so the threat and the fear that the religious perceptions, the religious beliefs, the religious practices are directly being undermined or affected. No wonder domestic violence increased, gender-based violence increased, teenage pregnancies have increased, and the religious leaders have been calling out for the opening of the religious institutions so that they can get back to their business. Now, business in enforcing morality or teaching ethics, let's accept that for now, but I think the COVID era has literally opened us up to the reality that our religiosity or our spirituality or our faith is skin deep. I mean, we throng to religious institutions on Fridays, on Sabbath, Saturdays, and Sundays. And in the absence of these congregations, now we have been exposed. The reality is coming. Now, allow me to specifically refer to the historical aspects of religion in Uganda. And as the poll question revealed, the role that religious institutions have played in Uganda. When we look at the time which we would call the colonial era, the introduction of Islam. Islam obviously had its influence on the Ugandan society because it came with trade, it introduced a culture, it introduced a language, and later on Christianity comes in two folds, the Roman Catholics and the Anglicans. The Anglicans come first, obviously, through the CMS, and the White Fathers come later on. And the late 1880s, we see, especially in Buganda at the Kabaka's court, competition for recognition, competition for dominance. Religion, what we may call religious institutions now, which are missionary, are trying to establish themselves as centers of power. And indeed they did establish themselves. Fast forward, obviously the religious wars of the late 1880s are a reflection of that competition for space at the Kabaka's palace then. Fast forward, specifically in the colonial project, religion was seriously used. Again, fast forward, the struggle for independence. Religion was a dominant factor. We can never forget the political parties as they evolved. The UPC, the National Congress, and the DP, and their attachments to both the Anglican Church and the Roman Catholic Church. Obviously, the Muslims were left out in a way, by and by, simply because the other religious organizations had centers for education or education institutions. And so, in what we may call social mobility, the Anglicans and Roman Catholics had an advantage in climbing the social ladders, if we were to say, in Uganda. Now, when we look at later times, okay, in the 60s, we see the Pentecostals coming on, and very unfortunately, Pentecostals were not so much educated because they came with more emphasis on spirituality, which was to do with more or less escape from the world, denial of the world. Unfortunately, this has so much changed to date because there is so much of engagement right now with the world. The Pentecostals then were in the category of what we would call otherworldliness, heavenward looking, unlike today, where they are earthward looking, and so much emphasis is on to do with material development and issues of engagement in the economy and social service provision. Now,
yes, Dr. Musana, we have about a minute to go.
A minute? Okay.
Yes, you've already been discussing for about 13 minutes now.
I thought it was 20 minutes.
That was for the main discussion.
Okay, let me conclude. The greatest challenge that we live with right now is the conspicuous silence of religious organizations in the political developments in the country. There is a muted voice of the religious leaders, and in the presence of lack of political direction, and that becomes a very serious concern. It's very important to note that UJCC and some of these organizations that came into being, Uganda Muslim Supreme Council, came in at critical points in time in Uganda's history because there was some degree of crisis. I will not go into the details because of time. And as well put by Castle, can we foresee something good being born out of this crisis post-COVID-19? Personally, my thinking is that, yes, perhaps when the floodgates are open of religious institutions, there will be new formations, especially in relation to the need, to those who met the needs of the hour. And it's in this regard that, as even Dr. Magara was noting, appropriation of modern communication channels it will be very, very key, and using the right language to reach out to the people will be very, very key. When we look at the TV stations that are owned, for example, by the Pentecostals and Born Agains, they have a following, they have their messages packaged, and they have a limited congregation that they reach out. And unfortunately, we do not see TV stations, radio stations by Uganda Muslim Supreme Council. We do not see this from the Anglican Church. We do not see this from the Roman Catholic Church, in spite of them being vanguards when it comes to issues of education and health. So what is it that is in for us post-COVID? I foresee new formations where a disgruntled majority of Ugandans will put to question some of the religious leaders, or may find alternatives in forming their own groups which will meet their needs post-COVID-19. This is my simple submission. Unfortunately, time that is not always on our side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pademosana, and my sincere apologies on the issue of time, but you will have a couple more minutes when we get to the public discussion area to reinforce many of those comments you may have missed out. Our second discussant today is Imam, let me get the names right, Imam Iban Idi Kasozi. And Imam Kasozi is a lecturer at the Islamic University in Uganda in the Department of Social Studies. Imam Kasozi is the Imam of Mwanga Mosque in Munyonyo and is also the Vice Chairperson of the Uganda Muslim Youth Assembly and coordinator of Foundation for Human Rights and Freedoms and Humanitarian Relief, IHH, in Uganda. Imam Kasozi is a member of the Imana Foundation and the Mia Foundation. He is also the founder of Imam Kasozi Climate Change Project in Uganda and several other organizations. Imam Kasozi is a regular on TV and in newspapers as well as radio stations while fighting for Muslims and their interests as well as other social rights. Imam, you're welcome, and kindly take your time to discuss the topic at hand today.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahabihi wa man tabi'anim ila yawmiddin. Dear viewers and listeners, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me take the opportunity to thank CASO think tank for considering me to be worthy of participating in their interesting discussion, which is aimed at improving maybe the welfare of humanity and particularly the citizens of Uganda, especially through their faith. I just got a little opportunity to go through the write-up, but I did, and it raises a lot of issues that need some attention. And I think the objective, as they put it, is if you look at their considerations, especially as recommendations, how do we get better from where we are? However, it is also important not just to underscore the importance of religion or the purpose of religion. The purpose of religion, which I take from, because religion is different from faith. Many people confuse religion to be faith, and others also think faith is religion. Faith is just part of religion because religion is a big perspective, and its role is really to attempt to answer perplexing issues that emerge among people, and they do not have a quick solution or a direct answer. Maybe COVID-19 may be part of that. If you have no direct answer, you have no quick solution. Religion helps you to come up easily. For example, if death is sudden death, if it occurs, for us in the Muslim community, the moment somebody says that from God we came, to him we return, or what we call inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, immediately the person who has a problem appreciates it, and he sobers down because he remembers that, oh, after all, somebody else created me, and it is him who has decided that I must go, and since he has decided so, then life goes on. Okay, so having said that, there are issues I have seen, especially where the research or the study tried to somehow critique the religious groups, especially vis-a-vis their readiness to respond to calamities. Also, I think their abilities to have enough resources for sustainability. I would say the faith religious groups or the religious institutions we are talking about are not different from the state in which they are operating. Because if you critically also observed, the state of Uganda itself was not as ready as possible, much as we do have a full ministry of disaster preparedness. And they had run to the masses. Maybe the religious groups could have also done this if they were congregating. And unfortunately, there was a misnomer. Or when they closed the congregational prayers, people confused with closing the places of worship. I don't think places of worship would not close. At least the religious leaders or people around them, a few of them would go there and pray, and also keep handling issues that emerge. Because I know, for example, if you asked me, Did Mawanga Mosque close? I will absolutely tell you no. Did Uganda Muslim Youth Assembly close? Absolutely no. And the other host organization that we work with, we did not close. We looked at issues that were necessary, and we did reach out to those we could, depending on the circumstances. Then, for example, I know ever since COVID started, every week I have a class or a discussion more than once, not only for Ugandan community, but globally. And issues discussed are ranging from very many issues have been discussed on that forum. And I think maybe what COVID did to us, it brought connectivity to even our brothers and sisters, especially the Ugandans in the diaspora and other people who are engaged in some of these activities. Therefore, the way the argument that we did act sporadic working and probably uncoordinated, that one had also some connection with the Ugandan state itself. And then I think what we should have done as religious leaders, I am sorry to say this, our religious leaders, the top ones, including my brother, who is our special guest, he knows clearly that the topmost religious leaders are now hostage to the state. And I want to say this without fear or favor, because instead of turning to the followers to handle issues that emerge, they always look to the state, and they have come like the poor people in this country. Almost everybody in this country, whenever there's anything, President Kiyambe, that let the state help us. And when they are saying the President Kiyambe, they are saying let the government support us, let the president support us, as if the role of the presidency is to look into our personal matters. Look around. Whenever any of us is ordinary like a car, a regional car, a district car, the bishop somewhere, all of us as followers, we are looking towards the state for the first car. But somebody, if you are leading more than 100 people, and you know their status very well, if you cannot use them to provide for you the immediate services that you need, then I think the failure is on your part. That's why probably people can say that we are either uncoordinated, or we are not properly prepared, or we are also, for example, creating institutions, or we are creating, I think, positions like the state is doing, for the sake of creating them, without first thinking really critically through, so that we can be helped. Is therefore in order for us to act smart, or to work smart, then to plan, then to shape the future, we need first of all to be purely independent and do a complementary role to the state, as we did it before, because all those schools you have mentioned, the majority of them, much as they are government aided, including the so-called government aided schools, apart from, I think, paying salary, not all the schools get the capitation grant. And you'll also find that if a school has a staff of about 100 people, the state only handles about 50%, or at most maybe 60. The rest is handled by the foundations through teachers, parents, or parents teachers association. And I am saying that for the fact because I know I am chairman of several schools, chairman board of governors, several schools, both government, private and community schools, and I have seen this. So it is important to go back and say, I think, to rearrange ourselves and say, where did we go wrong? Then the other element that probably affects us much as local institutions, religious institutions, it is because we have based our support largely from donor support. And you will realize that most donors do not give you development funds. They give you the philanthropy resources just to support you to get out of the problem then without to actually putting down something that you can depend on. I am very certain one of the organizations you said I subscribe to is Mia Mia. Mia Mia, this is the Swahili or Arabic, Mia Mia. It is 100, and we have a foundation called the 100 Shillings Foundation, where it targets our community members to ensure that each of us subscribes 100 shillings every day. And we are sure even if we can raise only 1 million Ugandan Muslims, or even Ugandans, 1 million, and each of us religiously pays that 100 shillings every day, meaning that every day we are raising 100 million shillings. We can never remain the same. We can never remain the same. But the problem is the habit and the culture of dependency has come to us. Also, if you look at why, for example, we did not perform very well, because the majority of us, we are really survivors. We are survivors from hand to mouth. And consequently, we find it relatively very hard to move on. However, with the few resources available, I'm very certain the religious groups reached out to many people, both their members, because I know I handle very many people. If you came to my village here, our village here, you realize both Muslim and non-Muslim, they know the role this mosque plays to them, because when it is a human issue, religion tells us to go beyond that, especially if life is about, if you are trying to protect life. The Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, said, actually not him, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says that if you protect one life and you ensure that it survives, you are as if you have protected the whole humanity. And if you take away one life, it is as if you have taken the whole humanity. Therefore, with that in the background, we can move on. My brother and friend, Pade Musana, mentions of that probably morality. Morality is not really for the religious institutions only. Morality is for everybody. It is because we are renegading from the purpose of what we should do as parents. That's why I think, and one problem why we experience those you are talking about, issues of diverging, or issues of intolerance in the homes, issues of violence in the homes, issues of premature sexual engagement in our homes, because one, the children became redundant. That is number one, meaning therefore that we do not have capacity to have our children engaged in activities of survival. We have actually made them also just dependent on us, everything, including that even when you want to send your child just 500 meters away from your home, he or she will even ask for transport money, okay? A distance that is workable. So when you go back and say, look, I look at myself, that in primary 3 or primary 4, at the age of about 10 maybe, I would walk about 6 kilometers, meaning 12 to and from every day. And I don't recall any day coming late to school or returning home late, because I knew what I should be doing. Therefore, we should see how do we really help. Maybe you can say there is a moral breakdown. And the other thing, the reason why the children became actually hard for management, it is also because we have chosen to hand over our children schools, and we think they are the ones shaped for our children. I know I am a victim of taking my children early into a boarding school. And the reason was because my wife got sick and we could not manage, but we never believed that our child, before it goes to secondary school, should go to study in a boarding school, because we know the challenge is there. But I know one of them, I took him to boarding school as early as 5.5 years. of age. But I all the time, I always regret it because I see what he misses because of missing me. And the reason is because I did not have somebody really support over this because I was attending to their mother, so I could not attend to both, and we wanted to go to school. But all said, we did not lose out.
Yes.
They have got the education, and we have managed to bring them up to the way we want. The other thing probably I want to say last, was that the symptoms that you have seen that happened to us as religious institutions are the same symptoms that happened to this state. That's why if you go deep and the accountability of the resources that we are given to the state has a lot of issues. Many people ask many questions, which I don't want to ask to go into, but I want to say this study is critical. We need to have ourselves as religious institutions and play our role that we started. Then maybe to train our people better, because saying that we don't train our people are trained. We are trained, but the problem again, who handles the overall curriculum of our state? It is again the state. If, for example, religious groups were given opportunity to control the curriculums, you would see a very different story. I am telling you, you would see a very different story, despite the fact that the resources could be small, but they would be focused. But because we have that syndrome of dependency, we move to that one, and even when we can manage whatever we can manage, we feel we are not able. But I think this is a wake-up call, and I would like to thank the think tank for really initiating this, and it has opened some eyes to some of us where we have to go. The last thing I think I didn't criticize about was that no outreach. I'm saying maybe some don't have, but religious groups and institutions have a lot of outreach. But the problem is that the issues are big, are too many. There is poverty, there is a lack of, this poverty influences very many other things. People have no food, people have no shelter, people have no clothing, people, whenever anybody gets sick, we have to find it, we have to raise the funds through thick and thin. And then maybe the bigger challenge you have given us is how do we get to industry and technology? You see, how do we get there? How do we, for example, what you have said is a bigger challenge in the Muslim community. Recently, the Uganda Muslim Supreme Council sold off 2 square miles of land for peanuts that they failed to utilize it when they have the community. Therefore, that means it is a problem of leadership, not the problem of religious institutions. Thank you very much. I can stop there. I will come back again.
Thank you so much, Imam Iban Id Kasozi, and we do appreciate the many words of counsel and indeed valid challenges that you have thrown out there. At this point in time, we'll be calling for the second poll question as we wait to get into discussant number 3. Like I mentioned before, we will be having about 4 poll questions today. Then the poll question reads, why, in your opinion, were faith institutions or religious institutions relegated to the non-essential category during the COVID-19 response efforts? Why, in your opinion, were faith institutions or religious institutions relegated to the non-essential category during the COVID-19 response effort? Was it lack of unity, limited financial resources, limited skill, disconnection from national emergency response efforts in the past, and discipline among the faithful, insignificant contribution to real societal needs, or all the above? There's about 7 options there. lack of unity, limited financials, limited skill, previous disconnections on national emergencies, indiscipline among faithfuls, insignificant contribution to real social societal needs, or all the above? Why, in your opinion, were faith institutions relegated to the non-essential category during the COVID-19 response efforts? And that is the question we are attempting to answer. Indeed, we need your opinion on that, because your opinion counts and your view helps us to see the perspective of where things need to be improved and corrected. And in the next 15 seconds, we'll be completing this poll. Your opinion of why faith institutions or religious institutions were relegated to non-essential category during the COVID-19 response. And in about now, we are ending this poll today, the one poll question number 2. Interestingly, most of us, 46% are saying all the above, but the biggest contribution by far is the insignificant contribution to the real societal needs. In other words, most people think religious institutions are far disconnected from the realities of society. And that is followed by a 12% of, in the past as well, they were disconnected from national emergency responses. So you can clearly see the issue of disconnect is leading there, and then closely followed by lack of unity. And thank you very much for participating in that poll. And that brings us to discussant number 3. Discussant number 3 is Mr. Charles Serwanja. And Charles heads the Department of Health and HIV/AIDS at the Interreligious Council, Uganda, with interventions delivered through a consortium of 7 faith-based organizations. These include the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican Church of Uganda, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Uganda Orthodox Church, and the Uganda Muslim Supreme Council, as well as the Born Again Faith. Charles is a public health practitioner with a combined work experience of over 17 years with national and international organizations, as well as a series of in-service professional development initiative qualifications. He has designed and conducted operational and formative research initiatives to generate evidence and shape strategies from program implementation process, and has championed the technical design of health and HIV, SRG, GBV projects funded by USAID and the UN. He demonstrates excellence in building and management of mutual and result-oriented partnerships and collaborations with Ministry of Health, the UN family, and other national and international NGO stakeholders. Charles, we're indeed privileged to invite you to give your contribution to the discussion at hand today.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. And greetings to my boss who are online. Bishop Luere, one of the council of presidents, the intelligence of Uganda. I have listened to hear Paul. I don't know, I annoyed you. I can apologize because the hearing you in the night for me. I'm standing in for my colleague. I am not a religious leader myself. I'm a public health practitioner, and since my bosses are here, I will not venture much into issues of faith, religions, and all those dynamics. I think my boss, Bishop Were, will come in to dig deep into some of those issues. Now, for Interreligious Council of Uganda, let me start by thanking the council for inviting us. I want to begin by just stating our mission. The Interreligious Council of Uganda brings together those denominations that were shared before in the earlier presentation. And the mission here is to promote peace, reconciliation, good governance, and a holistic human development through interfaith action and collaboration, advocating for the empowerment of member bodies for the common good. Now, that word common good has been frequently used by many of our previous speakers, and it is what, as individuals, as human beings, we were not born to agree on everything. Neither do even organizations or faith-based organizations or religious leaders from the various denominations are not entirely there to agree on everything. So we look out for those areas of common good, and then they serve as a point of convergence. Now, we are talking about the pre and post COVID-19 era. Now, history shows that about every 10 years, there is a global crisis. And you should remember we had a previous recession, which happened around 2008, 2009. Now, what COVID-19 has demonstrated today in our country is that we are all in the same storm of COVID-19. But unfortunately, we are not in the same boat. What this one means is that this pandemic has affected us in different ways. In fact, some of us might be reaping from the decisions we made or didn't make a few years back. And I think as we wrap up this conversation at the end of the day, let us try to make decisions today and build a safer, peaceful boat called Uganda as we go forward. Now, from our experiences as we continue to interact with communities, with different stakeholders, we have noticed from our perspective that on many occasions, many of us have not adequately understood the role of our religious leaders. It is not very clear to many people. If we brought that as a question on this platform, you would see how people would be struggling to really explain what are the roles of the religious leaders or indeed sometimes our faith communities. Now, if we look at our country, for example, we have one of the most inspiring national motto in the world, which reminds us that nation building cannot and will never be a selfish endeavor. It is a shared responsibility. Powerful nations of the world, I think, were built by leaders who gave up self-gratification in the sake of the welfare of the state. Now, the cardinal roles that for us we know here for our religious leaders is to steer our society towards the realization of the aspiration of our national motto, for God and my country. And that's what anchors the work we do here. We may have our own perspective of how we understand them, but for us, I think this is where we are coming from in terms of shaping what we do and how we mobilize our religious leaders to address some of the common challenges for the common good. I want us to acknowledge that, and I'm happy it was noted that there was a stampede during this crisis brought about by this strange disease called COVID-19. Well, as a public health practitioner, I totally disagreed with the approach that the government employed by looking at COVID-19 at that time, perhaps so much of a health emergency, without really spreading the wings and looking at its impact across the different aspects of society and how we need to employ a multi-pronged approach, not leaving anyone behind. You'll also remember that many occasions, His Excellency the President would come back a day after he has made his national address to clarify certain issues. And indeed, as one of our presenters shared, our religious leaders were left behind. Now the question is, and this has been a challenge across many areas, where we, the scientists, tend to disregard others and perhaps underlook their contributions. But in our mission that I've read, we're talking about holistic human development. The needs of a human being are just so many that not a single entity can fulfill them. Not one. It is a shared responsibility, and therefore our religious leaders have a fundamental contribution to contribute even in the pre and post COVID-19 response. Someone talked about domestic violence. We're now talking about high-rising teenage pregnancy. All those issues, I don't know whether government thinks that they can handle all those issues or other partners, but I can assure you that we need the guidance of our traditional keepers to work with us because they have the voices, they have the authority, they are highly respected, they have the networks and structures to effectively cause change for community social mobilization. And this is what we have to tap in. Now, I'm glad that we've noticed that what will be their role in nation building. Historically, like some of our panelists shared, some of us went to the schools, the best schools in this country that were faith-founded. All the major health facilities in this country, look at most of the social services are delivered by our faith communities. And therefore, it is very clear that, yes, the only thing that for us we have noted as Interreligious Council of Uganda is that we need not to focus so much on criticizing the religious leaders, because if you look at their history, how they are constituted, the training that they go through is largely around issues of theology and all that. There are certain things that begin to emerge. We're talking about a new world now. Before we talk about the new normal caused by COVID-19, we're talking about a new world of sustainable development, a new world of human rights. And human rights have to be applied not in part, but as a whole. So how do we now help the religious leaders at all levels make that transition from as it was before, as it was at the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. They must not remain there now because the world is in transition, and therefore we have to support them. And that's why one of our mandates as IRCU is to build their capacity in some of these areas. I had some colleague members here say they have to, I think it was part of the recommendations, they have got to, adapt to the new developments of technology and all that. Yes, that's the kind of transition I'm talking about. I mean, now, if you went to the Archbishop of Church of Uganda and start mentioning webinar, Zoom, you may think you are insulting him, or it's a way of humiliating them. These are new things. So until we need to help our faith community in making that transition from what they have been before, how they used to do things before, and then we help them to move. Look at the young people of today. The age of adolescent, for example, has changed. somebody of 13, 14 years, 20 years ago was a very, very young girl, a very young boy. But the same age category of today, they are so informed that it would be a mistake to continue calling them very young, maybe by virtue of the number, 14, 15 years. But in terms of information, in terms of access to this, in terms of the dynamics they're going through today, they cannot be called necessarily young. So they are so informed that we need to embrace the change and be able to support them. And therefore, this is what we are looking at today. Okay. Now, the challenges of the faith communities is actually maintaining the social and spiritual connections in the midst of this COVID-19. Yes, you can say people have spent more time together in homes. On one aspect, it has been good for the family, but on the biggest part of us, it has exposed so many things. People have quarreled this time, they have killed themselves, there has been a disaster. The home has been a disaster, not a peaceful home that we are aspiring for. And so much has come out that, oh, I have been living with a monster. I didn't know that the kind of woman or husband or wife I have is a monster. So these are some of the aspects we've realized as a result of the lockdowns. They have really raised so many other issues that we need to look at differently. So one of the roles that I think our religious leaders could bring on board is, and why sometimes we say let's open the places of worship, is to try and calm down the fears of our panicking Ugandans and offer hope in the face of this strange disease, because we really need hope, we need prayers, we need to be supported. There are people who are hopeless. They don't think they will ever recover again. So we need to really come on board and be able to look into those issues as much as possible. And of course, now, when we say opportunities, the COVID-19, what is creating for our faith communities or our religious leaders? My question that I was asking myself, does the current environment create opportunities for religious leaders? Okay. There are many of us, even in government, you see how we started, who may think that engaging religious leaders is perhaps a last resort. They may come in at the end of it, the tail end, yet they have been part and parcel of the forefront. I was glad that the government realized the importance of the religious leaders, and I'm glad Bishop Uwere is online, is a member of the National Task Force, and he supported in mobilizing resources in terms of food supplies for Interreligious Council of Uganda and through the various denominations. Many communities received support from faith communities, and therefore it was a reflection of our condition that if we all move together as a country, I think we can make a contribution. But in terms of the past, I think there is need to support our religious leaders, both the umbrella organizations, IRC, but also at the national level, to up and support the current generation of people we have today. So
Mr. Sarakuja, you have about a minute.
I think my bosses are here. I didn't want to go into some of the areas. You have realized that they have been struggling in terms of financial resources and other logistical support. That has exposed the weaknesses in the systems, and I think they are working very hard to business unusual how to go forward. So that was my briefing from IRC Secretariat. I leave some of the details of the dynamics of the theology and all that to my bosses who are online, where is there to give a little more detail because he's one of the Council of Presidents of the Religious Council of Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Serwanja, for that discussion. And indeed, on that very note where you have mentioned one of your key leaders, Bishop Joshua Rere, we will ask our chief guest to come in, but before he does, I will introduce him. Bishop Joshua Rere is the General Overseer of the National Fellowship of Born-Again Pentecostal Churches of Uganda, which some people call an acronym NFBPC. He is also the Director of Grace Christian Center Charitable Trust and Director of Grace Community Support Program. He is also the founder and senior pastor of Grace Assembly. He is also a local council chief of his village. Bishop Rere has witnessed the establishment of the National Fellowship of Born-Again Pentecostal Churches of Uganda, which was initiated on 19 February 1990 in Timothy class at Watoto Church, then KPC, by the late Honorable Baraki Kiria. He has been the clerk of that same forum from 1998 to 2007 and was responsible for legal advisory services for that same National Fellowship Born-Again Pentecostal Churches, including the drafting of the Code of Conduct with input from Dr. Mitala and Pastor Michael Chelsea, drafting his constitution, setting up the systems and structure, and registering the fellowship with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Bishop Rere is very passionate about national transformation and particularly operates in the areas of business, civil society, conflict resolution, development, internally displaced persons, humanitarian relief, social entrepreneurship, and he is married to Margaret Rere, and God has blessed them with 4 children, including twins. So, Salongo Bishop Joshua Rere, kindly give us your comments to the discussion today. Over to you, Bishop.
Thank you, Paul. I just want to know how much time do I have so that I condense whatever I have to say, because I noticed that it is this time that I was supposed to end, and that's when I'm now starting. So guide me so that I now can.
Bishop, you have your full 20 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, CASTO leaders, panelists, participants, and everybody who has contributed to this or protocol observed. Let me see how I can quickly use the 20 minutes, first of all, by making quick comments on my fellow panelists and what they said earlier. Dr. Pade Musana mentioned the fact that our spirituality and morality was exposed during this time as skin deep, and our conspicuous silence as religious leaders in issues of politics. And then Imam talked about our dependence on the state and a few others. I'll make some comments on those 3 points. But let me start where I think the real issue to me really is. It's very possible to deal with branches and leaves and fruits, and then you don't really get to the core. This issue of religion. My last sermon last Saturday, I picked on something that I could not discuss fully, but let me just recap on something that was so key in that discussion or that sermon. Let me share my screen, by the way, and then I can make it easy. Are you able to see what I'm showing everybody? If you can see, that will be a bit of a help because of the time. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. I mentioned Francis Bacon, who is the father of modern science, and he said something that greatly inspired me when I really first read it. Francis Bacon said that man fell from his state of innocence and from his state of dominion over creation. The fall of man was twofold. Now, first of all, it's very, very important that when we look at these matters, what is God's perspective about it is so important, because you can get lost in a forest because you cannot see the dimensions of the forest. If you are in an helicopter, you will see the forest dimensions differently. You will be even to be able to know that I will not go to the east because there is a lake that side. I'll not go to the north side because I'll end up on a rock or a forest. But when you're inside the forest, all that you see are the trees around you, and you may have a problem to navigate. Which side should I go? Should I cross this river? And so on. When you first go up into the sky and you are able to see the big picture, then it makes it much easier for you to navigate. That is where we are now. That's why we have all these many points. How does our God look at this? And that's what helps us to be in line with what he thinks about us. And then we can follow him better, and then we become more effective. And that is where I'm coming from in my discussion. It's so important to see things from God's perspective. Even in our scriptures, many times we always emphasize our part. What do we get out of this? People go to church to always get, what do I get out of this? And so many messages come because of that. Now, this summary here for me helped me a great deal because it kept me thinking and really realigning my thoughts in everything that I do in as far as church or anything else that I do. The two aspects, as Francis Bacon put it, is that those two falls are made good in two ways. The first one is by religion and faith. That is a matter of the heart. In religion and faith, we are dealing with the moral aspect within us, because before the fall, man was okay. He didn't have any corruption within, but the fall brought in corruption. Every good thing that God had created for man was corrupted. Eating became greed, drinking became drunkenness, sex, which was created by God in marriage, now became sexual immorality because now man was doing it the way he wanted, outside the precincts of what God originally intended. Dominion, which is the main responsibility God had given to man to rule on earth with the desire and capacity to rule, now was corrupted because man is corrupted within. Now he's going to use that desire to rule. Although he fell from his position of dominion, he did not lose the desire to rule. So he continues to rule, but now this time to exercise his dominion, he does it manipulatively. He manipulates, he dominates, he controls. This is not God. God does not manipulate, God does not control. But now that man is fallen, is now corrupted within, even the wonderful thing that God had created now are corrupted. So our approach should always look at these matters from that perspective of God. So when God comes to help us as human beings, he comes and starts from within our hearts. In Romans, as a Christian, I read in the Bible, Romans 10:10, with the heart man believeth, and with the confession of the mouth, you get saved. In other words, God starts from within. In the Old Testament, for 14 centuries, he gave the law to kind of control sinfulness. But in the New Testament, we are told that now the axe has been put at the heart. In the Old Testament, God was dealing with branches and leaves. Now he's going right deep to the very heart of the matter, which is the heart of man. And so when faith now is presented, is to change man, and that's why we call it being born again. For us, from the Christian perspective, is that you need to get a new life. The old life you got from Adam was corrupted. Now you need a divine life of God coming within you. That is the religion and faith, and it handles the matter of the heart. Why is it important? Because if you don't handle the matter of the heart, then everything else that you do, however good the intentions may be, they will be corrupted. Even those good intentions you think may still be selfish, because as far as man is concerned, he's corrupt to the core. So even what you think are good motives may still be selfish, and so you may not achieve. So that's why that becomes very critical. That becomes very important. But then the number two is to go back to what we were before. God did not create us to redeem us. That's not his work. He didn't create the Bible doesn't say, let us make man in our image so that we may redeem him, so that he may be saved. No. Redeeming came as a breakdown service. After we lost the train there, he redeems us and takes us back with the original intent. What was the original intent? Our dominion, exercising dominion. And so you note here, the real dominion is done through the work that we do. God gave man work in the scriptures, in the garden. Unfortunately, the Muslims also believe in the Pentateuch, what Moses wrote. And so man was put in the garden to work. This is the way to actualize him, one. Number two, to exercise the dominion. That is the way he exercises dominion over the earth. So all our forms of religion must be addressing these two issues, that apart from dealing with the moral corruption, the moral decadence, then number two, we must be helping people to exercise dominion. This is what religion should always focus on. And without going into much details, I also mentioned earlier, Sue Victor in 1120, when he taught that because of the fall, we have defective minds. Our minds became very defective. So we needed to study the study of God first. Then, because as a result of that, our hearts have been corrupted, our morals have been corrupted. Then we study ethics. And then because of the fall, again, our bodies will become limited. We are weak physically, so we need technology. Now that connects everything, connecting from the moral to the intellectual, and then to the hands, which is our technology. The technology becomes very, very important, because that is how we supplement our physical weakness, which came as a result of the fall. If we have that theory and we agree together, everything else fits in. It's very easy to fit in all the things that you're talking about. Look at the fourth point there, relationships. When God comes to us, he wants us to have a good relationship with him, to worship him through our work. Through work, we worship God. Work is a means of worshiping God. The original Hebrew word, avada, or the Latin word, is still the same. The root is the same, work and worship. And so God wants us to connect with him, but our connection with him always makes it easier for us to connect with others. It is because of the fall that our disconnection or misrelationships followed. It was when man fell that the horizontal relationship was affected. The vertical relationship with God, once affected, it will affect the horizontal. That is man to man. And also man with the land, with the ground. So when the vertical relationship is corrected, then it will correct the other two, relationship with man, but also relationship with the ground where we exercise dominion. So the three relationships, therefore, is one with God, reconnecting with God, putting our moral issues correct with God. Then immediately we also automatically result into healing of relationships. Then healing of relationship with fellow man, but also relationship with the ground over which we are given dominion. So I summarized it on that, as you see on that slide, that it always handles the issue of the heart, which heart now will affect the head, the way you think, and then the hands, which involves your work, and also your relationship with the other people around you. When people are corrected like that, send them anywhere. If you send them in politics and their hearts are right and their heads are clear for what they're doing, then their relationship with the other fellow men are right, the politics will be okay. Send them in education, send them in agriculture, send them anywhere you want. When you correct that perspective and we're in agreement on that, which I call the head, the heart, the hands, and the house. When that perspective is very, very clear, you don't worry where you send man. You do not worry what he's doing, because first and foremost, the heart has been clarified, clear. When you put him in politics, he'll be excellent. You put him in education, he'll be excellent. Put him in technology, he will not produce technology to kill others. He will not become a millionaire and look at impoverished people around them and use their wealth to destroy others, like some of the billionaires of the world are doing. You know, that is the real issue of the matter. And that's how I look at it. That's what I think we should look at religion as is. When the president invited us on the 29th of April, we had gone there to ask him to intervene, to allow us to help government to distribute food, because it was exclusively the National Task Force. And we said, no, we want to do this as religious leaders. Of course, he accepted later on, and we started. But our two main points were that when he showed us the new strategic national direction, and he told us there are 8 points that they had come up with as cabinet, and he gave us his list as they had agreed. We said, you have left out one of the most important, number 9. If you do all the 8 and you leave out number 9, all the others will not work, because the spiritual and moral values are so key in everything that is being done, that if it is left out, the others will not work. That's what we have experienced in our nation. We have good plans, we have good intentions, but because of the corruption within, we get billions of money, sometimes through loans, other times through domestic revenue collected, but it is all squandered, and very little really gets to the beneficiaries. And we told him, if you leave out this main issue, you find yourself very, very frustrated, because that is where the problem is. We summarized the problems, and we told him the corruption that we have in this nation has reached unbearable proportions. And therefore, that corruption is now bringing the poverty that we see, and that same corruption is affecting the politics. So we need a re-strategizing on spiritual and moral issues. Of course, we are also to blame as religious leaders, because we've not done our part in that particular part, in really leading our people to be morally upright, because there is so much corruption in the church, in the religions themselves. And so we are not condemning government per se alone, because the people in politics come from us. They come from our families, they come from our schools, they come from all the rest. So you can't expect them to be angels just because they have jumped into politics. They are coming from the same homes where all of us are coming from, the same institutions of learning, primary school, secondary school. So if we are to handle this matter, we told him, for us, we go beyond the public office. Our condemnation of corruption is not just for those people who are in public office, because they're just a product of the whole society. People get leaders they deserve. If the society is corrupt, don't expect them to get angels to become leaders, to become MPs, to become LC5s. So they are a product of us. They're just a reflection of who we are. And therefore, so we're going back to the drawing board and saying, what is the role of this issue? Can government develop morality? No, government cannot develop morality in its citizens. It can prescribe penalties and enforce them, but it cannot develop the morality of those penalties and their enforcement express. At best, government can express in laws and enforce the sense of morality already present or absent in its citizens. This is crucially important, and maybe the time here cannot allow us to discuss this further. But our approach in this matter is that we must go back to the drawing board, that morality is the only valid basis for law. We can make so many good laws to fight corruption in our society, but if that morality does not stem from the whole society, it will still fail, because government can only put into law what the people in the society feel this is it. So, and that is, we may discuss that on another day. Today it may not be possible, but the only basis for law is previously existing morality among the citizenry. So the only thing that will reduce, in other words, or eliminate abortion, is the deep conviction on the part of the many that abortion of babies is murder and it is intolerable. Later on, it may become a law, and we can pass one expressing or outlawing it, but there has to be a unanimous agreement in the society. So they will fight it. Look at when COVID first came in, everybody was alert. When people came into the villages, they were the ones, the villagers were the ones to point to the health workers. Somebody came from Dubai, is hiding here. You see, there was a unanimous agreement that we must fight this. Look at how easy it was for our health workers. In a few weeks, the first few weeks, everybody was on the lookout. Now, when that went down, it's so difficult now. That's how corruption can also be fought. When people start to be morally upright in the community, in the society, and the masses there is a massive awareness of it. It's very, very easy to fight it at the district level, Gombola level, every level. So another example is, only thing that will eliminate corruption in the society is the conviction of the majority of its citizens that this is a wrong thing. In other words, you have a responsibility to take this to percolate it to the communities down to the lower level. This means that your conviction in these and other areas and your forthright expression of them are more important even than the laws. You can even fight corruption when there are no laws. The people themselves become laws to themselves, become law within. If the morality is not there to support the laws, then even the laws themselves may be used immorally. A good example is our PPDA law. You need how many signatures to procure a computer like the one I'm using now. And all through those levels of signatures, people use the law to steal. If you don't give me this card, I'll not sign. So every level you have to. So in other words, the law itself becomes a means by which corruption is built. The law which was intended for good now becomes a law for evil. That's what Paul was talking about. The law was intended for good, but because I'm totally corrupt, so the law which was intended for life then resulted into death. The law can be used to get out of debt and other things, and then you can use the very same law to oppress people and so on. So morality must come from another source, not the law. This is an argument that most people I've had with very many people. There are three sources. For me, there are three sources of morality. Mere pragmatism, what works, or morality of consensus, what most of us want. Others do not count. If the majority said this is what is right, that consensus there builds a level of morality if those things are good. If they are bad and they all believe in the wrong things, then the law that will come out is terrible. But the third source of morality is the revealed religion, working its way into national life through those citizens who know and sincerely desire to please God. This is very key. This number three is what I think our role as religious leaders should be, where our religion gets to the core and sharpens the conscience of the community. We will sharpen the conscience of the society so much that they start to hate corruption and other vices. If government cannot produce morality, then it must be provided by a religious source. If it does not have this element among its citizenry, then whatever government itself will become corrupt or tyrannical because it's not acting on behalf of the people. In a declining culture and moral environment, the greatest need is not so much for more laws, but the spiritual renewal among the masses. And this is our role as religious leaders. Look at the quotation of Jacques Ellul in his book, The Political Illusion. In times of moral decline, the state will inevitably expand or else be overthrown because the need for order demands it. But in times of high morality, which is synonymous with times of great faith and spiritual awakening, the government need function only in a minimal way. Now, Imam talked about people always calling upon government, Mutuyambe, government, Yetuyambe, let government help. When people start to lose their responsibility, they tend to push everything on government, which is totally wrong. So the best situation is a few laws as possible and more inner government among the citizenry. Inner government comes from the inner religion, the fear of God from within. Even when the lights are off, the person will do the right thing. When the lights are on, everybody can do right. Those are the laws. But when the government comes from within, they don't need the light to do the right thing. Now, let me end with the second part, apart from the religion. But look at this. The theology or religion that we have will inform our philosophy of life. Then it will affect our ideology in politics, in economics, and so on. And then it will result into public policy and laws. This is how it should flow. Our convictions, which are spiritual, moral values, inform our philosophy of life, which then informs the way we do business, the way we do politics, the way we educate, the way we relate. Because the masses believe that then they become public policy and result into the laws that we make. Because of time, I want to end with the
about a minute to go.
How many? How many?
1 minute, sir.
1 minute, yes. So let me end with this, that in the past, how did it work? The scientific revolution started when the Protestant hermeneutic reading of the Bible, literally, was applied to the study of nature. Christian scholars agreed that God has written 3 books. These are Christian scholars, of course. They said the Bible is the book of God's words, while nature and history is the book of God's works, science and culture. And then the third is conscience, the book of God's reason within us, that we need to study all those books together. When we study those, you have a balanced person. Look at Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientists that has ever lived. He was asked, how did you come up with all these laws of thermodynamics? Now, Isaac Newton was a deeply religious person, was a very, very godly person. So he told them, I study a lot. I studied the book of God's words. He wrote a whole commentary on the book of Daniel, a whole commentary on the book of Revelation, and so many other writings. Now, when we were in school, we were never told about that. But for him, when he was asked, he said, how do you come up with all these inventions? He said, because I studied the book of God's words, and then I studied the book of God's reason within me, I become very sensitive to what God is doing, and then I'm able to study nature. So when you're studying a tree, you're studying the book of God's works. When you study biology and you're studying a human being is the work of God. So you are studying the book of his work. So for him, education is holistic. In education, you are studying all these works of God. And finally, all have to be, he said that all these have to be studied literally, inductively, objectively. This worldview inspired Christian universities to study nature. The first scientific laboratory in Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge has this inscription: majestic are the works of the Lord. Those who delight in them, study them. Psalms 1:1, verse 2. It is this desire to study the works of God that produced modern science. So modern science, today, how can we have scientists? They must study the 3 books God has written. They must be moral. They must, and as they seek God like that, we'll have a balanced scientist, not one who will come out and then kill people, but they'll have the heart, they'll have the head, they'll have the hands, and then they'll have community consciousness. God bless you. Thank you very much. I'm done, Paul. Can you hear me? Disconnected?
No, we are hearing.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, looks like Paul may be
Yes,
having
Bishop, thank you very much. And again, and we'll go straight into discussion for the next couple of we can hear you, Bishop. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
We are hearing. At least me, I am hearing.
I'm also hearing. I'm able to hear you.
I can hear you too.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Loud and clear, Mr. Kenya.
Okay.
Let us have the third poll
last
question
total
cover.
poll.
Great. Let us have the we have about 30 seconds to go on the poll question. Okay, thank you very much for polling. 70% of us believe that focusing on equipping communities with relevant teaching and skills is the one thing that faith institutions can do to increase their effectiveness. And then 26% improving collaboration and communication. So focusing on equipping communities is key to the faith institutions, and it is something that all of us on this discussion need to pay attention to. Thank you very much. And we will go straight into the next level discussion, which is the public discussion. And I will begin by reading out some of the comments. Olive Kobusinje says, very interesting question, Paul Wawire. I think government can be too easily let off the hook. The faith-based organizations definitely have a role, but government exists to manage society, and part of that management is ensuring that people live within the law. Government is empowered to do this by virtue of organs such as the judiciary and the police. And the second one is Richard Lutalo, who says the honest truth is that the body of Christ hasn't positioned itself as the mountain to take the lead in national transformation. There hasn't been a coherent system to this effect. In the light of COVID-19 pandemic, which fears have exactly been taking the lead? On top of the pack, it is the government and media. Yet in accordance with Isaiah 2:1-3, the religious mountain should be the chief among the mountains. It should be taking the lead in situations of disruptions like COVID-19. My question is, what exactly went wrong and how do we adjust to fit into the new normal? Now, Mr. Ritaro's question raises things that we have been discussing here, but I will now come to you, Imam Kasozi, with a question. You said a couple of very, very interesting things, and I'd like to begin with you. And one of the first things you mentioned towards the end was that morality is not for the religious institutions only. And you raised the issue of parenting, and you gave an example of your own family and many other people. And you challenged us that when children become redundant, when we take them away from activities of survival, then we are part of the problem. Now, my question to you, Imam, to what extent should religious institutions get involved in the morality question? So I think we would like to hear from you on that first.
Thank you very much once again. As I really put it at the beginning, the purpose of religion, and I think as Bishop Ray has ably demonstrated, first of all, we must first of all understand religion and its purpose, and then at what stage do we begin to educate our children, or giving them the real value, the real issues of religion and the practices. Because if we leave religion just to the worship places only and we don't bring it at home, we are wasting time. And then also the relationships, that the way we conduct ourselves are own. Because if you go deep in many of our cultures, I will give you, for example, my name is Kasozi. Therefore, you know where the Kasozi come from. They have a saying that the man, Msajja, Asajja Lata. And the very people then will restrict their girl child from getting out. But then the answer of this boy, if the boy is not going out, always, they will also say that he is not going to be a real man. They are sending him to chase whose girls. Okay, while you are protecting your own, you are chasing, you are asking this one to go and look out for the others. Remember, the others also have parents, and they also have boys. So there is some conflict of interest. What does religion tell you on morality, on the issues, for example, issues of moral uprightness, whether it is corruption, whether it is illicit sex, whether it is stealing, whether it is whatever you want to call it. Religion has a message on it, okay? And then it restricts you, and it even gives you some punishments, some of which the modern day age does not want to think about them. And why? Because we have never fully understood the purpose of, especially what we call deterrent. The lawyers know it very well. The deterrent punishments, something that deters is really not a punishment, but it is showing you that if you do this, this is what is going to happen. Therefore, religion in its fullest sense, okay, must be applied to a human being, and then it handles, I think, the three aspects that Bishop Reda has said: the head, the hand, and the heart. Islam, for example, will tell you that when you live on earth, struggle as much as possible to work for the hereafter, but don't forget your share on earth. I think chapter 28, the verse I don't recall very well, but وَابْتَغُوا فِيمَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ دَارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. That try to use what you have on earth as you prepare to go to the next world. The problem is why the religion sometimes fails. Many people don't believe that the next world is there, even if they are either Christian or Muslim. Somehow, when you talk to them, you see, then they will tell you how peer pressure, how people who have power, how people who have wealth. You see, sometimes we shift from worshiping what we are supposed to worship and we want to worship people who have wealth. You see, sometimes because we are also in need, we don't question. If I bring you some money, I don't question, where did you get this money? Therefore, unless we reach that stage, even a religion will fail. Why? We have failed to make it part and parcel of our life to guide all our social, our political, as well as our economic life.
Thank you, Imam. So in other words, we should remove religion from the boundaries of the four walls of the worship houses.
Maybe if I can add, Paul, you see, we should get out of Karl Marx's theory of the opium of the mind. And I think the other, I don't know, the other theorist who said that religion is a private affair. Religion is not a private affair, it's a public affair. Because they say politics is the one which is public, religion is private. And therefore somebody will tell you, don't mind about what I am doing, okay, in that aspect. So we must go back and tell them that no, religion is also a public affair because it is not done in a vacuum, it is done within the society. Therefore, religion should also help us to address the social fundamental processes. Process number one, interaction. How do we interact? Process number two, cooperation. How do we cooperate and work together? Process number three, competition. If you followed the competition that was there yesterday in the same family and the results that are coming out, it tells you where human is. Then the last one, which is conflict. It's also a fundamental social processes. We must know that where we live, all those exist, but what is critical is bringing us together. We cooperate in a manner that we read on the same page. By doing so, religion will help you to give you guidance.
Thank you so much, Imam. And I'll be coming back to you on other issues. Now I'm coming to Dr. Musana. When Mr. Seranja was giving his presentation, he inferred to the motto of Uganda. And for purposes of those that may not know the motto of Uganda as a country, on our coat of arms, it reads, "For God and my country." Now, Dr. Musana, what is the role that religious institutions can play in as far as patriotism is concerned? And as you go about speaking to that, you could also address how well we are doing on that in Uganda. Dr. Musana.
Your question is quite interesting because I'm leading a group of colleagues where we are working on the national symbols and specifically highlighting these national symbols, the national flag, the coat of arms, and the national anthem as very, very important aspects in Uganda for God and my country. As we very well remember, it was a school motto which was adopted as a national motto. It communicates a lot. To me, it is more of not a slogan, but a commitment and a confession. Now, that could also be serving as a commentary on the richness of Uganda's religious heritage. Very, very important acknowledgement. However, let me also comment on the aspect of appropriation and application. It is one thing to confess, it is another thing to practice. Nominality, the Latin is nomen, I think. Nominality, being called Christians and Muslims in Uganda and getting statistics and providing us with the statistics and saying so many Christians, so many Muslims, so many not committed to religion can be quite misleading. That's why I was saying that COVID-19 and the effects that we are seeing or the impact is a revelation of how deep our faith is. We do religion, but in most cases, we lack faith. Faith to me is more of the practical living of what we subscribe to institutionally as religion. And so what we are seeing is an exposure of the deception that we have lived with statistically, that we are a Christian nation, we are a religious nation. In the moments of crisis is when our faith is made evident. Just like I said, when government chooses not to recognize religious service as very critical, it also becomes a commentary on the government's view of religious and faith-based institutions' placement in the society. And when the religious institutions do not cry out and demand for their space, you know, my view of religion is that in our community is that we have the political and the religious, and both have a lot of power. Now, we need to balance these as the wings of a bird. And since they all have power and they have a following, my reading of the Ugandan setting is that apparently the political leaders know the power of religious institutions, and their interest is at all times to reign on the religious institutions, not to steal the show and lead the way. Since, let me locate this historically. Since this government came to power, it knew the sectarian tendencies that were evident in the political history of Uganda and how religion was used as a rallying point. Recently, it has been reported in Western Uganda and Shema area, where religion was again coming up as a rallying point for some politicians. Now, government has through and through worked to make sure that religious institutions and faith-based institutions do not prominently rise up and play their critical role. That explains why, as someone has already noted, government, through the political leadership, invites religious leaders to State House, when it should be the religious leaders going to a church or to a mosque or to a religious institution. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have, through developments, kind of become subservient. We have kind of become lost. The religious institutions have lost their sharp edge again because of this historical fact of the sectarian tendencies. But I think if we were to revisit, as Bishop Luere observed, if we were to revisit and perhaps come to that point of reconciliation and say, religion inspires great ideas. Religion is a basis for most of our value systems. Let's mainstream religion again. And then we will not have this sectarianism, we will not have this corruption, we will not have these social evils that we are seeing day in, day out, being practiced by people who subscribe to particular religious beliefs and practices.
Dr. Musa, whilst you're still on that, there's a question and a discussion going on in the Q&A, and I'm reading something from Eve Ojok. And Eve says, how do we engage more actively as religion in national issues that affect the populace with courage, unselfishness, and true patriotism? And she says that she brings the example of Germany. During the Second World War, it is recounted that the church took a back seat as Nazism unfolded in that nation, for whatever reasons they had, until it was too late. And she's asking, is there a wake-up call for the faithful in our land? Can we harambe around a common vision? And she kind of seems to be lost in there. So, and I think back to the point that Imam Kasozi touched on earlier, and something you've alluded to, the whole element of religious leaders being called to the State House. I don't think that in itself is a problem, but I think what is carried is actually the pan that is in that statement. It's not the action of going to State House itself, but the control aspect. Can you please speak to that? The role of religion in courage, unselfishness, true patriotism.
The role of religion, one of the missing links is in the area of training, leadership, and management. The other challenge is much more to do with strategic planning. The unfortunate setting is that most of our religious leaders behave like they are training us for the next world. And as Bishop Luere was talking, I was reminded of this American dominion theology, which is much more to do with man being placed in the Garden of Eden to take control, to manage, to have dominion. So there is need for us as religious and faith people to raise to the occasion and go into what we would call strategic planning, to learn strategic planning. In the case of an eventuality, what should we do? Is God going to send us parachutes? Is God going to send us aeroplanes to airlift us to a safe place, or He's going to give us courage and strength to confront situations and transform them? I want to believe that a patriot is someone who loves his neighbor. And this is where, again, Dr. Luere's submission comes in. Someone who has reconciled his or her relationship with the Creator and with the neighbor. Both the vertical and horizontal relationships. The other thing that I want to emphasize is in the area of appropriation of new forms of communication, and especially information and technology. This remains a very critical aspect that we need if we are to have our messages. Sorry, there is a helicopter overflying me. If we are to have our messages recorded and transmitted appropriately to audiences in the different languages and forms that they understand.
Thank you, Dr. Pade. Imam Kasozi, are you still with us? Imam, are you still with us?
Yes, I am live and
okay.
clear.
I wanted to come back to you on this issue because earlier on you made the statement that religious leaders are hostage to the state. And in my notes here, I observed that your point was that there's need for independence, but being complementary. How exactly can religious leaders achieve that in light of the current circumstances?
First of all, they have to work with the people, the followers, to believe in them, work with them, and share all issues with them, you see, and also to distance themselves from feeling comfortable in their chairs. Because the problem we have is that because of the challenges that came, whether it is in the Muslim faith we have challenges of leadership, whether it is in the Christian faith, the emergence of the born agains and the challenge they placed on the traditional faith that we knew, led to people trying to associate much with the state so that they are assured of their what? Of their seats. You see, a person is comfortable to be called the mufti even when he's not adding any value to the community, the whole community. But as long as he say, then when you challenge him, you tell him, the government knows me. It is not about the government to know you. It is the followers that you are supposed to guide to know you, appreciate you, and move with you in a direction. But many of these they end up actually contradicting. They are more inclined to the state than to their followers. And also, then other problem is because even the followers have also decided to not to take part in the day-to-day activities of their religious institutions, and they leave it to a few individuals. And therefore, if somebody, when the religious leader finds himself almost isolated and he has no way, he has to look for an alternative. You see, and I am not only talking about the state, but politicians at all levels. If you go to the district level, you'll find either the chairman or an area MP. He has some influence over the religious leader there, whether he's an imam, whether he's a county sheikh, or depending on the ladders that are there. Then the topmost here, for them, they are in the state house because that's where they think power is coming from. Therefore, if we don't move away from that, then we shall have a bigger problem. The other thing I think is that national issues, I think we would be doing a lot in national issues, but the problem is the way our politics is arranged. Okay, it is arranged in a manner that you must all subdue certain individual, and his ideas become supreme. That even when you have a superior idea, you want to relate it to the leader. Okay, you don't want to independently stand there and say, this one I can say it as it is. You will see. Why? Because we think that the vision of the whole nation is in one man's hand. And for example, in COVID, you know, the religious leaders were called some days before the lockdown. It was we see them in our after when they went for prayers, but they had been called earlier before, and I think briefed on how they were going to react. Okay, because they were not sure what the followers were going to do, or the lower cadres of their faith would do. So they called them first, aligned them to what the president wanted, and they moved to that. And if you are very sincere, if you become sincere, what did the president want out of COVID situation? He wanted that one man dominance, then others seemingly subscribing to him. Even if you fold the presentation he had in State House, he would come there with so many ministers. He would be the only one to talk, to the extent of doing work that would have been done by a head of department in a ministry, not even a PS, not even a commissioner, but a head of department. You see the president, the one doing it. Why? Most of our leaders in this country, they don't respect the president. They only fear him. And that is where the bigger problem has come from. That fear that we have towards him has become a challenge to the way we do things in this country.
Thank you, Imam. And Dr. Cecilia, I see you're back. Kindly confirm by an audio yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And I'm going to address the next question to you. In your absence, Dr. Magara completed the presentation on the think piece, but you've been following the discussion. And one of the discussants earlier on said that the state of the nation is symptomatic of the state of religion in the country. And I would argue and say if we see corruption in the nation, then there is corruption in religion. If you see immorality in the nation, there's immorality in religion. How do we begin to influence a positive narrative in the nation, if you could speak to that as religion or as faith institutions?
Thank you very much, Paul. And I want to thank all the people who have been discussing. And I think the issue of morality has really been stressed. And I believe it stems from the body of, from the religious institutions. I think somewhere in our presentation, we alluded to the fact that in the early 19th century, the religious institutions then were so much in charge of instilling the values in the citizenry and also in the leaders that came to lead our nation. And I believe for some of us in this age bracket, we saw that at those times, these issues like corruption, the random immorality, and such other vices were not common. But over the years, we have seen people derail. And that is why we feel like it is a reflection of what is in the church. And also what we have noted, especially recently in the contemporary churches, is that we have, apart from preaching the gospel of salvation, people have literally been preaching the gospel of prosperity, and morality and other principles and values have been sidelined. And therefore, I believe that the younger generation, the people that are taking up jobs now, they do not value those other aspects of godliness, the fear of God, the morality, the way the earlier people did. And it has been commented by most of the employers that these days when you employ the millennials, what they want is to grow as fast as possible. And the first thing they think about is buying a vehicle, and they actually keep wanting to change the models. And for them, that is a sign of success. So really, I feel like, and I believe as we were discussing this issue in the Castle group workshop, we feel like the issue is actually going back to training these young people to know these values and to grow up in them so that they begin to value. And like I think Bishop Loera said, it's not the laws that keep people from doing the wrong things. If people have the correct values, they will naturally abstain from the wrong things. But no matter how many laws, when they don't have that thing instilled in them, they will continue to do what is not right, and they will find other ways. People have even said that the use of technology can deter people from committing some of those crimes, can make the accountability clearer, but people have even upgraded their sins. There's cybercrime and all that kind of thing. So really the issue goes back to grounding people with moral values, with godly values. I think that is where the key thing is, and it starts in the church. One of the panelists says it starts in the home, but the parents are members of the church. And if the parents know what to do, then the children will know what to do. I think that is what I see.
Thank you, Dr. Oyet. And I would like to put my last question to Dr. James Magara, since he came in as they say, a dangerous substitute when we had the emergency. Dr. Magara, the issue is, again, I believe it was Dr. Musana who intimated to something about who leads who. And my question to you is, should religion lead government or government lead religion? kindly comment on that, Dr. Magara. Then we'll get to the panelists for their last commentaries each. Dr. Magara.
Thank you, Paul. I think my comment would be that they have different roles to play. And they need to play their roles. Bishop really brought out the points very clearly about the importance of the heart, the hands, the heart, the hands, the head. I mentioned the head as well, and the house. There are places where the government, as the statement made in the presentation, government was not created to produce morality. Government can deal with evildoers and bring order in society and so on, but they don't. Government really doesn't reach the heart. So if you talk about leading and leading from the heart, then the religious institutions have a very key part to play, and that needs to be recognized. As you rightly said, if you want to control people by laws, it's a very hard job. It's a very, very hard job. And those of you who run businesses know that there can be no end to rules and regulations. But if you have people that are governed inside, then external government becomes very easy. It's been said there are about 5 types of government, and the beginning of all leadership and government is personal government, and that personal government happens inside you. If we have people that are governed inside, then you don't need too many policemen outside. I've been to some countries abroad where you don't. There was one country I visited and I did not see a policeman. I was there for about 2 weeks. I did not see a single policeman. But people are keeping the rules. They stop at traffic lights. When the traffic light says orange, they slow down. When it says red, they stop. They give one. It's because something has been built on the inside, and that is the role of the religious group. It's not a role that government can play. And if that space has been provided properly, and if the people that lead in the religious sector understand their role and play that part effectively, then the result is a citizenry that is easy to govern. And if government recognizes that, then it would allow space for that to happen. Because the result is you have citizens that are easier to govern. On the other hand, if you do not have that happening, then you've got to produce more police, build up more prisons, try and spend on security a lot more. So, Paul, your question. On the other hand, government has its own role. It has a role in maintaining law and order. That's not the role of religious groups. So they have their roles to play, and I think the key thing is not a question of who's leading, but in recognizing and respecting the roles that each sector has to play in the well-running of society. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Dr. Magara. And I think I would like to begin bringing this to a close. It seems to me that we lost Mr. Seranja. He must have dropped off somehow on the call. And I will invite the existing panelists today to give their closing remarks in a minute each, beginning with Dr. Cecilia, then Dr. Pade, then Imam Kasozi, and then we shall have Bishop Rele, and then we will bring this to a close. Dr. Cecilia.
Thank you very much, Paul, and everybody. Thank you very much, Paul, and every member of the panelists, everybody who has contributed. My last word is very simple. I think the greatest cry on the hearts of many among us is really that the religious leaders and the faith-based organizations should own up and start doing the right things, because the real core thing is working on the heart, and that is our part. And it has come up again and again. So it is my heart's cry, my prayer, and I believe it's the prayer of many of us, that we take our position, do the right thing, and I believe that will take the nation in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cecilia. Dr. Pade Musana.
Yeah, I would like to thank Castle for this time, commenting on the religious institutions and post-COVID. My concern is that you cannot give what you don't have. And it is apparent that preparedness for emergency situations, the religious institutions have a serious lack in this. And going forward, I would kindly ask such think tanks to engage with religious and faith-based organizations, especially in the areas of training. One of the areas that I'm keen on right now, in view of the need, is strategic planning, emergency planning, and also the aspect of appropriate communication. I very well know that most of our leaders are old type, and it's very difficult to update their systems when it comes to especially use of gadgets. I would appeal to religious leaders and to make sure that they open up to mobile and young people, people who have skill, who have knowledge, who have ability to put to use the God-given talents that will be for the good of humanity and to bring glory to God. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musana. Imam Kasozi, your last comments.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Paul. I will also thank CASO think tank, the CASO group, and also thank Padre Musana, who introduced me, I think, to you because he called me first. And specifically thank the team for trying their level best to look into what affects. And I'm saying if we are going to measure the occasion, we should get out to investigate the needs and the aspirations of our people and try to respond to them. That is the only way we can influence them and then push it. Then the last thing is that it is not all lost. We should make a reflection in our past, and we pick out to what we call a very successful point in it. We do the appreciative inquiry of it, and then we use it as a springboard to move ahead. Then we let us check ourselves. Let us check ourselves as religious leaders before others really check us. Last but not least, we should also push the state and the government to reopen the places of worship, because we have realized in this report that they play a big role in influencing the behavior and conduct of the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam. Bishop Rere.
Yes, I want to thank the CASO team, Dr. Magara, thank you, Paul, thank you, and the rest of the panelists. 3 comments. One is that to transform a nation, sorry, can you see me? Yes. One is that to transform a nation is not not a single person, however anointed, however called by God you are, you cannot transform a nation alone. So we need to work together. And that unity requires a lot of humility, requires us to work together to accommodate each other. This is still a big problem with so many people. We need to accommodate each other because the nation belongs to all of us equally, whether we believe the same way or not. Secondly, some people demonize us religious leaders visiting the head of state. The mere fact that he can even consider us in a cabinet meeting when they have decided to lock down a nation, and they say, let's first call the religious leaders. really acknowledging that these people have influence, and if we don't explain what we are going to do, we may have a problem, because in the past we have spoken out, we have made our positions clear, like the age limit issues and others. So we shouldn't demonize this matter. We can approach it from John the Baptist, who ended up being beheaded, or we can approach it from Nathan the prophet, who went to David and managed to get him to repent, though he did it privately. They both may have achieved the same problem. John the Baptist didn't achieve, but Nathan achieved, because he did it privately in a good way, but what was important was both of them were prophets. So I want you to have that attitude. And finally, this week, we are starting a meeting together as Interreligious Council to discuss how we can handle issues of corruption in this nation. And now government has finally agreed, after we have explained to them after many months and years, that we are the key people in fighting corruption. Laws alone will not do it. They need our part. They can only handle the public sector, but for us, we cut across public sector, private sector, business, homes, education. That is the discussion. Put us in prayer for the next whole week. We are going to be together and we are discussing that matter. Thank you very much, and may God bless you, the panelists. And maybe the issue of technology will be something that we need to talk about a little bit more, because we need it. We need a separate one for that. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Bishop Rere. The issue of technology was actually discussed in great detail about 5 webinars ago. So the videos actually do exist. As a think tank, we have built into that. But at this moment, I want to register my personal appreciation and on behalf of CASO to all our panelists, Bishop Rere, Imam Iban Idi Kasozi, Mr. Serwanja in absentia, and Dr. Pade Musana and Dr. Cecilia Oyet, in no order of importance. We appreciate your time with us today. It has added immense value to us as Ugandans. Thank you very much. My name is Bukenya Paul Michael. I've been your moderator today, and at this point, I would like to welcome Mr. Ernesto Katwesije to close this webinar with some comments and with a word of prayer. Thank you very much. Ernest. I think Ernest is having challenges connecting. Dr. Magara, kindly take the honors to close us off for today.
Thank you, Paul. Today I've been a dangerous substitute for a number of things. Thank you all. Just a word of appreciation once again to our panelists. Thank you very much for sparing time. We really value the fact that you could put aside time. All of you are extremely busy people. But
thank you very much.
Hello.
Paul.
Okay, I'll just continue. Thank you that you would put aside time to be with us and to get your insight. Thank you for the criticisms, the critiques, which will help us improve what we've written. And the post-webinar team is up to work. The rapporteurs have been capturing the points have been coming across, and the people working on the various documents are also up to work. So we are looking forward to being able to pass to you the thoughts that have come out of this webinar. So thank you once again. Thank you, participants, for availing the time to be part of this meeting, for listening, for also commenting on the Q&A. And your ideas have also been captured. We look forward to having the issues. Great to hear what Bishop Rere said about the meetings that are taking place this week and the engagements that are coming to address the issue of corruption, which is a very big cancer in our society. As he rightly said, it doesn't matter how grandiose the plans are for the future. Without dealing with the cancer of corruption, there is no way we are going to move. So it's great to know that there's a mobilization at the IRCU to begin addressing the matter of corruption. And CASO is available for this kind of engagements. It's been an intense crash program this year. We didn't plan this, but the pandemic pushed us in this direction. And we do want to continue to avail space, ongoing space for interactions of this nature. We are far beyond our time, so I'd like to close the meeting in a word of prayer. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for the time that we've had and for the many ideas that have come out. Thank you for the candidness with which the presenters have spoken. And we do pray that you will bless our country. You put us in this country. We have many differences. Help us to learn how to live together in this space and to build a country that is harmonious and that serves the purpose for which you created it and brings glory to your name. We pray that you bless our engagements this weekend. And we ask all this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next weekend. God bless you all.